So now we reach the point in our spacefaring career where we're ready to actually land on a moon. The big moon orbiting Kerbal. Now, the first step we need to do is actually the design of our lander, because our lander defines what weight our payload is going to be. It's basically our payload for the rest of our rocket to get into orbit and, shove it toward that moon so it can land safely. And also, like in an airplane flight, the two most dangerous points in that flight are takeoff and landing. The same is true for our rocket. So we've already taken off a few times, but the landing is what we really need to plan for. So basically, we want to design our lander first and then build our rocket around it, because then we'll know how much weight we have to deal with, and basically, how difficult it is to land, and get some practice doing that before we actually get to a moon. So basically, we're going to want to scrap this entire thing. Now, basically, you can come back with the entire lander or just the command module. I don't think one parachute is going to cut it when you have the weight of an entire lander coming back with you. Or if you feel you're going to have enough fuel to actually make a landing in the large gravity well of the homeworld, you can try it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I find the best strategy is a lander, if you're going to bring a lander back, attaching several parachutes to it, which we might do later. Basically, it's a design decision you're going to want to make yourself, whether or not you bring back an entire lander or just a command module like they did in the Apollo missions. And like they did in the Apollo missions, another design decision you need to make about your lander is, basically, when it lands on the moon, is the whole thing coming back with you, or just one light, small piece of the lander? That's actually what they did do in the Apollo missions, too. Only a small part of the lander actually came back. Because space and weight and fuel are such precious commodities in spaceflight. This game is actually much easier than real life is. So basically, we're going to want to design our lander. Now, I think it would probably be a best bet to just bring back the command module, but we're going to want to make sure that command module actually comes back with us. So, we're probably going to employ the same strategy that the Apollo missions did and have part of the lander launch off by itself. And because the gravity of the moons is much lighter than the homeworld, this engine should be sufficient for our purposes. And so we're going to want another stage here. And perhaps an even bigger fuel tank here. And some landing struts, which are right here. Let's see. So I don't think we need big honking heavy ones. These ones should be okay. And another kind of design decision you have to make is, do you have less parts and less stability? Like, for instance, these landers' 4 legs would definitely be more stable than 3, but it would also be much heavier. So that's just another design decision you're going to have to make. Same deal here. Now, this should be okay, but what we're going to want to do actually is test out taking off and then landing with this lander on the gravity of the actual homeworld, because if we can successfully do that, we know this lander will be able to handle any celestial body we try and land on. So that's what we're going to want to do here. And this has some little fancy fluffy stuff. This antenna, I have absolutely no idea what it actually does, but it's kind of neat, so I like to attach it. It also has maybe a handy marker of, which part of the spaceship is the front, but it's not that heavy, so we can probably afford to have a little bit asymmetry that way. Basically, so another thing we want to do is put this diagonally, like a 45 degrees, because what the one feature this game actually has is your Kerbal astronaut can actually climb out and disembark and walk around on whatever planet, surface, or in space that you happen to be, sitting on. And to do that, we're going to need ladders. And we don't need a ladder on all 4 sides, so we're going to want to do that. And do that again. And maybe do that again. And perhaps this. This is an extendable ladder. We'll be able to extend across multiple stages for us. Now, when we actually launch the rocket, this will be all packed up, and so will these. So it's not as gaudy as you think it is right now. So this is our lander, and so we're going to test this design out. And one thing we really need to add before we're actually done is RCS thrusters. Now I've mentioned those before, and you're finally going to see what they actually are. So this is an RCS fuel tank, and basically they're thrusters. They're like tiny little thrusters that aren't really meant for propelling your rocket forward, but maneuvering it, making it point toward the right way, or getting rid of that dreaded sideways motion when you're about to land on a planet. That is the worst nightmare of any lander pilot, is the sideways motion. So these ones are just thrusters that basically shoot, you know, propellant out sideways. So we want a few of those, and these are ones that shoot propellant in 4 directions. So we're going to want some right here. That looks good. And I'm not sure if fuel crosses this coupler, so I'm not going to put any up here for now because I want to save weight. So I'm not going to put another fuel tank up here and more thrusters because I want to save weight for now. So this is going to be our test lander, and we're going to see if we can't land it successfully on the homeworld, because if we can do that here in the high gravity, we can do it anywhere. So just for the purposes of testing, we're going to put a little booster here just to get some altitude, and then we'll come back down. Okay, so this will be a lander for Mini Rocket 1. Save and launch. Okay, this is our test lander, and I think I neglected to actually include any SAS modules on there, so that's just awesome. Sometimes it happens. That's why designing a rocket is something you go to school for. So let's launch. We've launched, and we probably want to, I can show you the RCS thrusters. See them going when I turn. They'll definitely help you out maneuvering. But they use their own kind of fuel, but it is rather limited because this tank's kind of small, so you don't want to use it if you don't have to. So we're going to have a kind of a diagonal path here, just so we get some lateral motion when we come back down, because we're definitely going to have that when we land on the moon, as you'll see. Detach that, and now it's just up to the lander. G is to deploy landing gear. And there you go. So basically, when you land a lander, here's what you want to do. You want to make sure you have eliminate all lateral motion. So I'm going to point. I'm going to use RCS thrusters. I'm going to point my rocket here to make sure this points directly to the top. So I can do that by following a line here and pointing it that way to get rid of any lateral motion. Now I'm actually going down quite fast, and I'm probably going to hit the ground. This wouldn't be a problem in a moon with far lower gravity, but it's probably going to end quite badly for me right now. Yeah, I definitely don't have the thrust to overcome my speed, and we're dead. And as you can see, catastrophic failure. Okay, after a few failed attempts, I have now come up with a lander design I'm happy with, and I'm going to demonstrate to you a correct landing that doesn't cause the death of everyone. And so you can just see how it's done, and I'll explain how I'm doing it, and then basically we'll be good to go to design a rocket around this lander design, and you know, head off to the moon. Okay, the primary design flaw with the previous landers was the RCS thrusters were not properly balanced, so it made the lander tumble, basically, when you used RCS, which is exactly what you don't want to happen. So basically we are trying to eliminate sideways motion. I'm referring to it as lateral motion. Yeah, basically, I think we're actually going upward now, which is something we don't want because it wastes fuel. When we get to a moon, we'll definitely have a lot more breathing space in every respect, because we'll be falling slower because the gravity will be pulling us down slower. It will be easier to overcome. Yeah, basically, if we can do it here, we know we have the skills to do it with the least amount of fuel possible. And it's important to keep that number pretty low. Actually, I've been doing the wrong direction this entire time, so I'm just going to do the other way. And it's important to keep that number low, but not too low, because if you take too long to get to the surface, you'll end up wasting fuel. And it's wasting fuel is basically what we're trying to avoid here. Now that we're center, SAS module, there. Getting a little close to the ground. We want to keep it under 10 meters per second. That seems to be the tolerance for this landing gear. It seems to be the tolerance for the command module as well. We're getting really close to the ground. Oh. Okay. There you go. That was a little rough, but it was still a successful landing, so we turn off SAS and RCS. No thrust on the engines, and we deploy. Right-click on this part to deploy them. Some are like that. Oddly enough, you can right-click and disable the flowing fuel tanks. I've never actually used that feature. I've never known of any situation where you'd want to, but depending on your rocket design, you might actually end up using it. Who knows? It's up to you, depending on what rocket design you want to use. If you want to make sure one fuel tank is left over. So we click in EVA, and basically use Wasad to walk around like it was a third-person, shooter or whatever. Only there's no guns, just an astronaut. So we extended those ladders, and the ladder mechanic actually is very well done in this game. It's right off the bat, very well done. So you press F to let go, I believe, or spacebar to let go, F to grab. I got that backwards. So, pretend you're on the surface of a moon. This is basically how you walk around. You can jump with spacebar, not very high because the gravity's high here. You can press R to activate your jetpack, and the gravity is too high for it to actually do much of anything, but basically, they would function properly if you were floating somewhere. It has limited fuel, as you can see. I will show you more about how that works basically when we do an EVA in the middle of space in preparation for when we land on a moon. So yeah, I'll show you that later. And so basically we can press R again to put that away. This F to grab the ladder, and then, W to climb all the way back up the ladder. Go back into the command module, and then we can end the flight. You cannot end a flight while some of your crew are still EVA, and you can only have one crew member EVA at any given time. So that is landing a lander, and we know since this lander design has successfully landed that not only are our skills good enough to land it, but the lander itself is a good enough design to handle pretty much anything properly prepared. So, end flight.